everyone. So glad you all could make it this afternoon. Welcome to our live broadcast today. This will be an online webinar, and we're going to be covering integrating PayPal with your FileMaker solution. And we'll be demoing a brand new sample file that RCC has developed, and it will be available for you all to download at the end of the webinar. Now, right before we cut to Richard, I just want to touch on a few of our links here, different products we have. We got learningfilemaker.com, a lot of great video training there. Our Pro 16 training, that's a great course there. And we also have FM Starting Point, which is a fully unlocked free starter solution. Let's hand it over to Richard and start the webinar.
Hi, everyone. Richard Carlton here. So welcome and feel free to ask questions as you go. And Miles and a couple folks will be responding. I'm surrounded by about 3 computers here. So if it looks like I'm looking around, it's because I'm looking at questions coming in that are live. Real briefly, for those of you, most of you know who I am, but for the 5 or 10 people who don't probably know, we run a FileMaker consultancy out of across the North America, really. We're based largely in California, but we have offices in Dallas, Texas, as well as a small office in Nevada. We're going down, kind of what people know us for the most is FM Starting Point, which is this CRM that's a free starter solution that basically can run a business. And it's been tuned up. It's got a great interface. We always keep it up to date. Works great in the FileMaker platform. If you're interested in that, it's totally free. www.fmstartingpoint.com. And then we have created probably the most prolific set of videos out there, far and away larger than any of the other companies that do video training. It's 65 hours thereabouts plus of videos that we've created for Pro 16, Go. We've also done some on terms of starting up your business if you want to do startup entrepreneurial type things, as well as other topics on UI design. So we have those at learningfilemaker.com. Real quick, so most of you are here because you understand what FileMaker is, but this is a recorded session, so some people won't know. And just as a brief summary, FileMaker is a development platform, a platform to build a custom application for your business or for someone else's business if you're a consultant or a developer. And so it has a number of products that make it work on the internet, on the cloud, on the mobile devices, on desktop computers. So it's pretty slick technology. I've been doing this for 27 years now. The platform is about 30 years old. I started back in 1990, and it was different back then. Some of it you could still see the lineage of, but it's pretty much modernized now. It's very exciting, and they are continuing to do new cool things with it. We're very excited about that. To learn more about the FileMaker platform, we have a really good video here. This is kind of my explanation in about 5-6 minutes on what the FileMaker platform is, so you kind of understand what that's all about. So the goals today, very important, is to understand the business process of what we're doing here. The whole idea of PayPal and invoicing and why it's such a big deal. And in short, probably one of the number 1 or number 2 things that people do with FileMaker is they create and run billing and invoices out of it. Probably the number 1 thing they do with FileMaker is they build their own customized contact management CRM. They either build their own from scratch, or they'll take something like FM Starting Point and they'll customize it. That's like the number 1 thing they do. Typically, the number 2 thing that we see done is people invoicing and billing customers out of it. And so this webinar today is to address that second issue, which is making the billing and invoicing much easier, much easier. And then, of course, the webinar level today very much is one where we're targeting your intermediate developer or power user. So someone who's brand new to the platform, some of this might be a little bit over your head, but it's good material to know. If you're a longtime seasoned FileMaker ninja, and I was talking to some of those folks online this week, they can build this stuff themselves. What we've done, though, is we've actually pre-built it and then simplified it and then commented it and then providing the training so normal, average, intermediate, non-CodeMonkey people can work on it. Does that make sense? So I know some of the CodeMonkey folks, out there, and I say CodeMonkeys very affectionately. We have about 30 staff at RCC. Probably 2/3 of them have this ability to go in there and code. But for normal people, they have a day job. They do something else. They run their business. They work on cars. They manufacture homes. They make high technology things. They do other business items. FileMaker is an add-on skill set they do to help make their operation run smoothly. So those people don't want to sit and learn CodeMonkey stuff. This webinar is really for you. It's very cool. we're going to talk a little bit about PayPal, or talk a lot about PayPal actually, but we also had a conversation with some of the management over there at PayPal earlier this week. We got a little bit more inside kind of idea of where they're going and what they're interested in doing. And very much they're very interested in this webinar. My understanding is that they will either be in attendance or will be watching this at some point to understanding what the FileMaker platform and community is and how that can supplement or help PayPal, etc., from their perspective, right? So a lot of people suggested to me that, well, we're not coding this, so we're kind of like stealing the code. And whenever someone says we're going to steal the code, I always think of one of my more favorite fun games that I've seen is Grand Theft Auto, right? So we're stealing cars, except we're not really stealing anything. We're just creatively borrowing code out of a sample file that we've already given you. But you get the idea that you're not building this. It was really built by someone else and you have borrowed it, right? So someone suggested that this might be a fun title for the webinar. So we're going to run through this in real speed with a real file here in a second, but I want to run you through the mechanics of this. I need everyone's brain to be connected. Once again, this is a junior mid-level conversation, a power user conversation, understanding what the business process is here. So we talked about people building invoices in FileMaker. That would be potentially what you see on screen right now. This is a very simple invoice. We have some PayPal buttons on the right side in a column. And what ends up happening is that you fill out the invoice, and so you have the person, their email, some line items typically, whatever those are, and you're going to press a button in that solution. This is a solution that we have built for you. It communicates to PayPal, to your account, your specific account, and it builds the invoice in PayPal. And then it emails the user an email saying, hey, this invoice is here, can you please pay it? The whole benefit to this process is that you get PayPal and credit card processing to invoices that you create, and you don't have to take the credit cards, process them, worrying about all the security issues that go around securing credit card information because you never see it. So the customer gets the email. From the email, they go and they can view the invoice, okay? We'll talk about this a little bit more, and Miles, you can chirp in here if we get to a point where questions come up. That invoice largely mimics the invoice that you have. Now, the invoice in FileMaker, you can design it beautifully with all the controls in FileMaker. The visual layout of the invoice on PayPal, pretty limited. I think in the future, they might give you more flexibility in this area. I could see them doing that. They haven't said that, but it would make sense. And you can put your logo in here, but in terms of like reorganizing the aesthetics of it, not something that's really supported. A lot of you, that won't matter to you. Some of you are kind of artists and it will really bother you, but that's kind of a limitation in terms of that. So what happens is they go online and they can pay. They pay with a credit card. They pay with money that's already in their PayPal account. They don't have to have a PayPal account to do this. I get those questions all the time from people. Hey, it says I have to have a PayPal account. And if you look on the screen, it says pay with a PayPal account or just pay with a credit card, right? And the people press that button, they can pay with a credit card. And so they get the status right here in green, it's paid. Now, the next thing that happens is that we need to know that it was paid, and we have to see this in FileMaker because we're not logging on to PayPal. The whole point of this is we don't want to be logging on the PayPal website continuously during the day, which is what a lot of people have to do. We just want to stay in FileMaker in one interface and have it do the communicating for us. And so what we do is we run a script. We press the button that says get PayPal status. It's hanging out over here, right there. That's the button there. And it goes to PayPal, once again, initiates a communication with them. No plugins, no special stuff. It's just the REST API technology. We'll talk about that briefly. Once again, as an intermediate person, you don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is worry about how to steal it out of the sample file and plug it into your own file. So you press the button, it goes to PayPal. It says, hey, has this been paid? And then what it does, it comes back and it says, yeah, it's paid, and it changed the status up here, and then it fills in all the information. So that tells you in FileMaker that the invoice is paid and the funds are in your PayPal business account. Once they're in there, you can move them to your corporate account or whatever you want to do. That's the whole mechanical process that we're talking about today. Very important. So we can do a demo here. And so we're in FileMaker right here. I'm going to start a new record. Now, in terms of setting all this up, we'll go through that in a minute, but I just want to walk you through this real quick mechanically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoice myself, and I'm going to send an email to RC Mobile. It's one of our test email accounts that we have. And I'm going to put in here first item. And if I have a typo, you will have to forgive me, right? And so this is this part of the screen over here, this whole kind of left side of the screen is what you would already probably have in Invoice Solution, or it's what's already in FM Starting Point. And then once we have that, because it's all set up for me to send it to the customer and to get them to pay it, all I have to do is press one button in FileMaker. So we say push to PayPal. And what happens is a short delay. It's actually now in PayPal as a draft, and almost instantaneously PayPal processes it forward and they send the email to the person. And if I press the Get Status button again, it tells me that it was sent. And so additional buttons light up here that I can do things with, which would obviously make sense. So now, of course, I don't have visibility into what the customer is doing. Now, I'm going to be the customer here and you'll see the other side of this, but to check the status, all we have to do is say Get Status, right? And nothing changes because the status hasn't changed. Now, if I go over here to my email app, I've got my webinar process here. Oh, and there's the invoice just came in just like that. Very cool. Now, as a side note, part of our conversation with PayPal was to ask them, what is the time delay difference on an email? And their goal is, whether they publish this or not, kind of an internal goal they set for themselves, about 60 seconds. And clearly that was 60 seconds. Over the last weekend, we had a deal where it took a little bit longer, and it turns out they were doing some maintenance or something on a server, but generally it's about 60 seconds. So what happens is that we can go ahead and say view and pay invoice, and this will pop this open into a browser. Notice once again, it is ready to be paid, and I can just say pay it. Now I'm in PayPal's website, it's secure. Now down here is the button that people always tend to miss because it's not blinking and in red. And obviously PayPal, from a business perspective, would love you to have an account with them. They push it hard enough that it actually, in my opinion, intimidates people and irritates them. It's there, but how hard do you push it relative to doing it with a credit card? And so it's enough that people ask me about this about every 3 or 4 days. So what you do is, I'm not going to pay with a credit card. I actually have an account, and I'm just going to pay for it real quick. I'm going to put in my super secret password, assuming I can remember to do that. And it's going to process the order, and it's going to say securely logging me in. And then so here it says we can pay it out of my PayPal balance, which I have a couple $100 in or whatever it is. It's our test account. And then, or I can pay it out of my linked bank account, but I don't need to do that. So I just say pay now. If you're doing it with a credit card, it would look just like an Amazon credit card transaction. You just put your credit card information in, billing address to be done. Now notice here, it's paid. So it's totally good. I'm going to go ahead and close this for the moment. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to hide that. Well, notice over here, FileMaker doesn't know that it's been paid. And that gets into a question about technology and things, but basically we have not set up FileMaker to listen for PayPal to initiate a conversation. When that happens, that's called a push notification. FileMaker is not listening for push notifications. We need to run a script. However you want to run a script trigger, press a button every time you open the file, whatever you want to do. So we're just going to say get PayPal status here, and it's going to go and talk to PayPal and come back with the information. That's it. That's the whole process. Now there's some supporting items in here that you saw a little bit ago. You could cancel the invoice from here. You could update the invoice if it hasn't been paid, right? So those are two things you could do. A couple other things I'm going to show you right here. We put these links in here to make it easier, but you can actually see the invoice from the customer perspective. This is what the customer would see. And in this case, it's paid. If it had not been paid, it would say unpaid. And the other one, if I can log onto it, is the perspective of the business owner or you. And so what this is going to do is it's going to show you a list of all the invoices that you've generated and sent out. And you can also, of course, interact with them, and we can cancel them, or in this case, it's already paid. You can't cancel a paid invoice. And from here, you could also do the refund. We haven't wired a refund into that. Is that a API link? Do you remember that?
There's a separate API call, but like completely different from the invoicing API, but PayPal does support refunds via REST API.
Yeah, okay, so that would be codable, but it would not something that we have in the sample. So everything minus the refund we built into here. And so you can actually look at this. And what's interesting, I'm going to point out a couple under the hood things at this point, and some like kind of the mechanical things going on. First off is that we create a invoice. We have a unique ID for our invoice. we send that to PayPal. PayPal attaches that to the invoice over here, make it very helpful. So over here, that's the matching number right there, right? If I click on it, it'll probably bring it up. Yeah, there it is. And so you have the number right there. That's our number. Now, that helps us keep track of it. But when you create the invoice on the PayPal side, PayPal creates their own unique ID for it. Looks like a UUID. And what I'm going to show you now, I'm going to remove this. I'm going to move this over. So the stuff on the right side of the screen here is all the stuff behind the scenes if you're like seriously into working on this and improving it or changing it. This is all the communication that's going on in the background. This is all the code monkey stuff that we've already done for you. And we're going to walk through it a little bit, but understand this is here for a diagnostic purpose for you to check and see what's going on. But the short version is that PayPal does apply an ID. This is their own invoice ID. This is unique for the invoice. And when we actually take our invoice and load it to PayPal, they take our ID, then they assign their own ID, and they give that back to us. So we actually have both our ID, which is kind of for us to keep track of it, plus we have their ID. And then in the future, when we talk to them and we want to know about this invoice, we send back to them their ID, not ours. As another side note, if you don't send our ID with it, what they will do, and you say create, they'll create a new invoice and they'll auto enter an ID for you. It's a 4-digit number. I think it starts at 1,000 and it iterates. And in fact, the first demo of this had that. You cannot submit a second invoice with this same ID, right? But if you leave it blank, they auto assign it. And then you could press it again and it would create another one. And it would auto assign the next invoice. So you could get into a situation if you don't send them your ID that you could actually have one invoice here and create 2 or 3 or 5 or 100 PayPal invoices that would be effectively identical. That's kind of a mess. I don't go down that road if you can help it. So for those of you who think about relational database, so when I talk about relationships, you really understand that. If you don't yet, don't worry about it. We have some videos that talk about building relationships and understanding that. But kind of conceptually, this is kind of a one-to-one relationship between our invoice system and PayPal, and we like to preserve that. Now, technically, there's no relationship in there, but at least a link, right? But we have the number, and we can do the call with a script to go and get information. So really, mentally, I think of it as a one-to-one. If you don't send the invoice ID number, you're going to have a one-to-many. It could get away from you. I just think it's a bad idea. So that's kind of the nutshell of this. Now, I'm going to show you the scripts real briefly here. These are the scripts that are in the solution. There's not a lot of scripts. In fact, the ones you only have to worry about are these right here. Now, a little bit about these scripts. This came about because one of my engineers needed this, and they built it for their wife's business. And I take my staff out to dinner, and we were talking to him, and he was telling me this story about this, and I go, oh, that's really cool. And I go, how long did it take you to build that? And it works. And so I just whipped out the wallet and paid him for his time and got the file from him. Now, of course, the file I got, when people build stuff for themselves, they don't comment it. There's no error trapping. It was kind of a mess. We took the solution and then started adding comments to it. And then what happens is so I have my next engineer at RCC add some comments to it, and he adds little single comments like this, which if you're a code monkey is plenty for you. But for someone like me, I like a little bit more verbose instructions on what's going on. So if you see big comments like this is where I got into it and started making major notes as to what's happening. And so real briefly in this system, when you make the call to PayPal, you're going to get authorization. You're going to send to them your secret ID. We'll talk about the secret ID in a little bit. It's what you set up. Once you put it in here, you don't have to worry about it. What ends up happening is that you get a string of text. It's a string of text. And if you come up here to the top of the screen, you're going to get a string of text right here. This is your secret ID. And what ends up happening is that you send that ID to them. They authenticate it. They give you back a token. It's another string. It's just a block of text. And that block of text is good for what? About an hour? Is that what it is, John?
Yeah, 1 hour.
Yeah, it's about an hour. Different services, the token will last longer, but the bottom line is that token then is what you send. And this is part of the OAuth. If you hear the term OAuth, once again, this is code monkey land. But OAuth is this authorization where you send a key of information, and then the company comes back, the service comes back and gives you a temporary ID to use for the next X number of minutes. And so that's what this first part is. So in the scripts, you'll see it where it says authenticate. And now that we're authenticated and we have the secret token or the secret string, now we're actually going to do the part where we request it to PayPal, right? And so we've done all the work here. When you get this file, the file will come with, this right here. So you're going to get this download. It'll be a zip. And what ends up happening is you can download this totally free. So you're going to get this file over here. I don't include my secret code with it, so you'll have to set yours up. We'll talk about that. But it basically comes with a business process document, which we talk about the business process. We already kind of covered this. The invoice in FileMaker, it creates a mirror image in PayPal, more or less. The person pays it, we get notified back. This is to help you understand the business end of this thing. And then we also have the technical instructions here, which are the step-by-step things to do to load this in. It's fairly long, but it's very straightforward. It's not complicated. There's no plug-in. You have to have FileMaker 16. You're going to do this in Pro 16. But once it's built, you can take the solution and run it in Go 16 pretty easily. And it did work in WebDirect as well, which I was pretty happy about. So anyway, so this goes through the idea that you're going to copy these fields and do this and do that. The bottom line is what you're going to do is you're going to wrap up, you're going to grab all this information here, and then you're going to grab up the line items, and you're going to package them into, it's a HTTP request, http://, it's a bunch of stuff. That's basically what REST API is, the whole idea of using an HTTP URL, and you put a lot of extra stuff in it. Once again, it's kind of code monkey land, so I'm not going to get into it, but you shoot that off to PayPal. PayPal sends you back the response, and in that response is a bunch of text that's formatted in a specific format called JSON. That's another new terminology term. It's kind of the modern current tech. So you've heard of XML before. JSON's kind of like, from a layman's perspective, JSON, XML are kind of the same. It's a way of seeing data in a different format. They put returns and little symbols and stuff. And it's, once again, very technical, but understand that this handles it all together already. And so if you look in here, you can look in here, and we'll zoom in on this a little bit in the video, but it's a URL with a bunch of stuff on it, and that's what gets sent, and that's what PayPal handles. So that is this part of it. Once again, to set it up and running, you're going to need the critical things you need is to put this in, that number right there. You got to put in that text, that's your email account text, right? You have to have that, and you have to, those two things are the pieces that you have to have, and then it works. It just works. There's no other anything with it. And so we're going to go into this a little more, and I want to run through the website real quick and show you how that works. I'm actually logged into myself right now. So when you get this and you want to set this up, first you have to have a PayPal business account. There's no charge for a PayPal business account. They kind of phrase it, and what they're doing with a business account is they're actually verifying that you are a real person. I think some people try to create a PayPal account for fictional people, etc. And for tax reasons, PayPal is going to keep track. If you made $1 million, they're going to report it to the government as income, so they know that you should be taxed on it. I don't know that they do that necessarily with a personal account, but they definitely will do it with a business account. So they get your tax ID and stuff like that. They also verify that you have a business account that you attach it to. In this case, it's attached to one of my corporations. It's RCC, it's our Texas division, right, which has a separate corporation. And so what we do is to set up this API, I log on. So I'm logged on with my username and password. I go to Profile and Settings. And the steps we're doing here are in that Word document that you saw. It's step by step, it's in the Word document. And so what you're going to do is you're going to go over here to My Selling Tools over here on the left. You're going to press that. Then you're going to come down to API Access. And there's an update button right here. I'm going to press that. And then it comes down to the screen right here. Now, I need to define something real quick here. I don't have all the history on this, but PayPal has a service or a subsidiary department division. I'm not sure entirely its legal entity, but it's called Braintree. And Braintree is their kind of API services company. I don't know, once again, I'm sure PayPal will be happy to send me a note clarifying what Braintree is, but it has its own website. I get the impression it has its own staff, its own team, and they actually connect API stuff to them, but they also connect it to Apple Pay and some other services too, which is kind of cool. So the Braintree operation is not purely PayPal, but we use it just for that in this case. So I'm going to say Manage SDK Credentials down here. And so once again, we're on the PayPal site, but we're setting up the Braintree component to it. And I'm going to say Manage Credentials and Currency Settings. And what I can do is I can scroll down here, And you can read all this stuff. Take your time to read it. I mean, we're under, we're halfway through the webinar and I haven't taken any questions yet. So I kind of want to move along here. But what you're going to do is you're going to come down here, and these are applications that we've set up. These are apps that they expect will talk through the API to them. So we have FileMaker. I can create a new app here just for the purpose of creating a new one. And I'm going to say, I'm going to call it FM2 for now. And I'm going to say create the app. And so what they are going to do is actually build the secret credentials for me to get into their system. And so that's what we have right here. So this is the secret code that you don't share with people. Even in this demo, after the demo is over, we'll change out our API credentials, etc. Because I'm sure in one way or another, it'll get shown in this video. But this is the API for the client ID. This is the API or the client ID for the live. So client ID for Sandbox, client ID for live. If you're an old school FileMaker developer, kind of like me, around a long time, this threw me initially because I thought it was an account that was either in Sandbox mode or it was in live mode, because historically that's how Authorized Net and other companies have worked. And what it is that you can have PayPal and the Braintree API behave differently, Sandbox to live mode, based upon the client ID you send to it. Both modes are always on. So when I first got here, I was trying to turn on live mode and then leave it there. And every time I came back, it was in Sandbox. That's because both modes are always on. Is this something that I ran into? And because I'm old school, right? I've been doing it 27 years. So when they introduce this, I try to apply it back to what I've already seen before. And it's just a little different. So Sandbox mode, for those of you who don't understand, is kind of like, I've had a couple people ask me what Sandbox is. And Sandbox is basically like you're a 5-year-old in the sandbox with a Tonka truck, driving around. And whatever you do in the sandbox does not affect anything outside the sandbox. So outside the sandbox is the real world. And inside the sandbox is where you play, right? You play with your Tonka trucks, you play with your code, and you can send it the requests and you'll get the request back, but it doesn't actually create a real invoice and it doesn't really email anyone. And so for what we were doing, we did some of our testing in Sandbox, but then we did a lot of testing in live mode, invoicing ourselves just to see the interaction with the user, etc., which was really half the battle for us to understand where the user would interact and what they could see and what they couldn't see. So this piece right here, what you copy and paste up here out of the live one, is what you're going to paste over here, right here, right? Makes sense? So that's how that works. I want to point out one thing over here is that when you do the Sandbox or the live mode, you need to come down here and you need to scroll down. And we once again mentioned this. You need to turn on the transaction search and then go ahead and save that as a change. And now this thing is totally set. I could switch it out and use it, but that's the whole idea. That's how it works. So you get the idea. So there's FM2 right there. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. So those of you who saw my amazing secret code, I'm going to go ahead and delete it. I have to put the app name in here. I think I did that. Delete. It's interesting that you have to actually put that in so it gets the right one. All right, so there you go. So questions, I'm sure we have tons of questions. Miles, where is the question area at? Where are we at with the questions? Help.
Yeah, we've had a couple questions about currency, like if it's not U.S. funds, any changes, differences?
I haven't tried this with other currencies, but normally what PayPal does is you create it in your currency and you send it to them. And when they log on to pay, it will convert whatever their currency is. Like we had a deal this morning where we did this, and I sent the gentleman, it was yesterday actually, we sent him an invoice for $69 because that's the full price of one of our training courses, the video course. And he paid for it in, I don't remember what currency it was, but it came back in 90 whatevers. It was, I don't know if it was euros or what it was, but it was different. The number is different. So PayPal normally does the conversion for you. So at the end of the day, you really get the $69 in there and it adjusts it up or down on their end for you. Okay, so it's kind of automatic, which is cool. Once again, it makes life very simple. But it's good stuff. It's really, really good stuff. And this is one of those technologies and tools that we were rolling out internally to use in a couple niche spots within our organization. I know that our customers, a big chunk of them, will be interested in this. Whether they use it or not, they definitely have an interest because this simplifies the whole idea of, I got to go to PayPal or I got to go somewhere, or you got to hook up a plugin that talks to Authorized Net or whatever. I think this is just simplifies so much. And there's no plugin, so it's native FileMaker 16, right? very cool stuff.
Is there recurring payment support?
That's a good question. I saw that in there in the documentation. If we go over here in documentation, I'm going to point this out real quick. We are shooting a bunch of videos to kind of reemphasize this. I know we're hitting it fast. There'll be a bunch of broken out videos in our Pro 16 course. They've been shot and they're in editing and they'll come out next week. Those will be available. This recording of this event will be free. Those are part of the paid course. There's additional documentation in here. You press it, it goes into the documentation. It talks about this in great detail. There is support for scheduled payments. I think it would be a different API that you would, the code would be a little different for this. It's not in this demo per se. Once again, if you get into a situation where you need help with this, talk to your local FileMaker developer or email us at support@RC Consulting, and one of our folks can help you figure out what you need. Because there's definitely a number of developers in the community who can help you with this. Certainly we're one, and then there's other ones as well who can help. And then, of course, some of you are, like I said, FileMaker ninjas already, and you can do this yourselves. The implementation time for someone who's got some CodeMonkey background, 3 to 4 hours maybe, something like that. About that's, but it depends on just a very basic implementation as opposed to customizing it a great deal. A very simple bolt-in, I think, it takes about 4 hours, maybe less. Depends how much caffeine they've had, right? So, John Hogle, do you have any comment on the scheduled subscription thing? Because I saw that in here somewhere. I don't remember where it was at, though.
I know it's not a part of the invoicing API. I was also trying to see if I could find out where it was at, and I don't see it in the documentation.
Yeah, it's somewhere. I don't know. It went by me. It's one of those things. There's actually a lot of documentation on this, and there's a lot of documentation on the Braintree side, and so it's kind of important to understand what you're getting into. I know that PayPal is working to update their documentation. They had some documentation there a little bit about the template that you see, the visual of the template on the PayPal side. At one point, I think they were thinking about allowing you to customize that more with the code. I think near term, probably that's not going to be supported, but long term, I could see them, offering to give you a CSS style sheet or something like that, if you could make that work, or setting up a template with them, and then that way it customizes it more to your needs. Clearly, that would be a future feature of the product. It seems to me something that if they get success with this and they get a lot of people using it, they will support it more and more and more, right? Like anything else. The thing is that by you using this, you're using more PayPal more transactions, and they're making 3% typically off a transaction, 2.5% to 4%, somewhere in there, depends on the interest rate at the given time. But they're making a little smidge, like the credit card fees, right? They're making a little smidge off each one. That's how they make money. I think it's great. I'm happy for them to make money. I have no problem with that. But they're incentivized for you to use this, right? They want you to use it more and more and more. So they're very positive and pro supporting this kind of integration. They want people to integrate this. Other questions? It's an awful quiet audience. More questions?
I've had a few people ask about WebDirect. Does that work? What's your thoughts?
Okay, so here's what happened. So I fired it up the other day, and I fired it up with this demo. And the first thing it did was gave me a weird error. And then after that, it worked fine. So my general I couldn't make it fail after the first. I don't even begin to know what that was about. And it could have been me being stupid, right? Because I was doing it at 1 a.m. and I was kind of tired for the day. And I was like, oh yeah, I should check to see if this does this. But it did. It once I got it in there and ran, it worked fine. So you could, of course, you're going to build it in Pro, and then you could take it to Go. Go works fine. And then WebDirect is the web browser rendering of a FileMaker file if you're using FileMaker Server or you're using FileMaker Cloud. So for those who don't know what WebDirect is, it's a way of a very basic browser interface. It reproduces this layout. In fact, this layout looks almost identical in WebDirect. So we didn't do anything to break it out of WebDirect. And like I said, it did work for me for about 10, 15 minutes about 3 or 4 days ago. And I'm not the biggest WebDirect fan unless you're on an Android device or something that really needs it. I'm very big on using Pro on Mac and Windows and Go on iOS devices, and then using WebDirect if you can't get those to work. My general impression is that Pro and Go are more reliable in terms of overall stability and happiness, etc. WebDirect's fine, but like with Pro, I pretty much never crash Pro. And if you work on WebDirect all day, every day, you're periodically going to be able to cause it to crash the browser or do something weird. You have to redraw the screen, right? So, it's the limitations of a browser, right? as opposed to a fully loaded application like Pro or Go. So, but once again, understand that the communication, the scripts that you're writing, then run on the FileMaker server, right? So your FileMaker server is actually doing the communication to PayPal, right? So additional questions, Miles?
Yeah, we've got kind of different areas, but basically the general thing is, are there plans to add additional features to this free file, or if we want things, how do we get that?
Yeah, I mean, if basically the free file is free, and here it is. The product that we maintain and we update going forward is FM Starting Point. That's where most of our research funding and whatnot goes into that. We have a lot of little standalone files, like we have a document management one that's really cool that we released about 2 weeks ago. I don't see that, getting a lot of updates. I mean, these are kind of one-off demos. So it's unlocked, it's free. So if you want add-ons to it, reach out to us or find your local FileMaker developer who has experience with REST API, which is kind of this newer stuff in 16. Historically, if you want to do REST and these kinds of communications, once again, REST is just another way of saying a two-way communication with another service online, but it's got certain standards that revolve around it. It's like I say OAuth. OAuth is the authentication that typically you will see on the front end of a REST communication. So they kind of go together, but they're not the same thing. OAuth is authorization. That's the auth part, right? And then the REST is the communication once it's authorized. And so this was part of Base Elements free plugin. It still is. And FileMaker said, hey, we really need to support this for everyone. So they went out and they put this in the product. It works pretty well. The people who are legit code monkeys really love this stuff. They are another one of the engineer who built this originally has also been playing around with Shopify. And so the running conversation at RCC is whether we should do a sample file for shopping cart, right? Which would be very interesting. The problem is it's a lot more complicated because, I mean, you understand here we have an invoice. We're telling PayPal to go bill it and then let us know when there's money, right? That's one process. On Shopify, it's where online e-commerce, you're going to have to load the products and then load the inventory and then update the products. And then when an order comes in, you bring the order back and you fulfill it. And then you let the other system know that you fulfilled it or whatever's going on. There's a lot more moving parts to that. It would not be a very super simple sample file. It would be a lot more moving parts to it. So it's one of those that I would like to do it. I think it would be super popular. Today we have hundreds of people here on this webinar. That one, we probably have 1,000 people at for that one. That would be a big one because everyone wants to be able to do shopping cart without actually building the shopping cart. And that's the whole REST technology. FileMaker can talk to PayPal. They can talk to Shopify. It can talk to Dropbox and move money with that. Almost any service that you can think of that's up to date. The only one that I was unhappy about the other day, I was trying to, for those of you who've seen me write emails, you know that sometimes I write faster than I should. I don't edit very well. I wanted to do an API to Grammarly to have Grammarly give me the feedback on it and then bring it back as to what I had misspelled or bad grammar, whatever. And Grammarly doesn't have an API, a REST API. They don't have any of that. And they were actually almost agitated. I asked them. I think they get asked about 12 times a day. And I got kind of a snarky email response like, no, we don't, leave us alone. People have been communicating with PayPal previously, but this version of this new API is new in the last, I think, 12 months. So for them, it's kind of a new thing as well. And there's, obviously early adopters, but this is going to become the standard for communication, for going out to another system and interacting with it and to bringing it back. Right? For those of you who don't know, I'm going to show you this real quick. Just a second here to show you what this looks like. So when I say REST and what OAuth is, you'll get an idea. It depends on your skill set. It's not rocket scientist level stuff, but it is more technical than what most people want to get into. But let me just show this to you. So up here, we set some fields, we set some variables, we set some values. And then what we need to do is I notate, we need to do some prep work before we talk to them. Of course, there's a typo there. And then what we do is right here, we go off and we actually do 2 transactions to send the invoice to PayPal. The first one was the OAuth to get authorized. So that's really one kind of communication piece. And so you'll see this down here. It says select context, select the target. That's a field. And then you can see the URL. So this is the URL right here. That's the REST URL, well, basically a URL to talk to them. And then I can come down here and take a look at the curl options. This is the new stuff that really was part of base elements. And this is the real stuff that's really new in FileMaker 16, the ability to put the curl options into the code. And so those of you who are code monkeys go, oh yeah, well, we didn't have to invent this. This stuff was already on PayPal's website because they document their API. They say, this is the stuff we expect you to send to us. So our code monkey person goes, oh, that's what I need. So they copy it off the website, they paste it in here, and then they have to adapt it. So it swaps in like a field or a variable out of FileMaker in, right? So that way it makes it dynamic. And so that's what we did. So this came across, and then one of my engineers, this was probably some like number or something, some bunch of text. And then my engineer went, oh yeah, no, but we need to substitute this out with a value out of a field. So they put in this block of text right here, or the field. So that is a field in our database. And so they do that, and they keep doing it and trying it and doing it and trying until it actually connects and works. That's what they have done for you already. And that's why the whole Grand Theft API thing, they've already built the car for you. Now you get to steal it and drive off with it without the cops chasing it, which is kind of a cool thing. So that is the API that does the initial communication. And then down here, we test for error conditions. Did it work? Did it not work? And so right here, we're ready to actually send the invoice creation to PayPal, right? Because we've been authorized. We've got the point we're authorized. So then we send this one, insert from URL. This is a web command on a web browser, right? Once again, we do the same thing. There's the target for the API, or that's the field. That's the results come back. So we send the web request out, and the results come back either into a field or into a variable. Doesn't really matter. And there's the URL once again. It's actually, I think, almost the same URL. And then over here, we have the curl options once again, and they're a little different. What we did is we loaded the invoice in there in a format. So it's the line items like, item 1, quantity, unit, right? Item 2, quantity, unit. And so all that was in that variable right there. So it gets sent off to PayPal. And if we give it to them in the correct format that they expect, it creates the invoice. So once again, the work's done. So is this super complicated? Not really, but it's tedious. It takes time. And so it's great when one of my guys builds it for his wife, and then I pay him, and then I look at it, and it's like, oh, this is not documented. So then we've spent the last 2 weeks going back and forth with me going, what does this code do? You didn't document it. Document. When you hire a developer or you are a developer, people like it when you document and you explain what you're doing. So, we don't have to like read your mind, like the Jedi. This is not the comments you're looking for, Jedi mind tricks. I don't have any of those skills. Otherwise, I wouldn't need you to comment. I would just read your mind, right? So for those of us who can't read minds, then we need all these green comments in here. That's what all the green stuff is in here. Comment. So that's what this stuff is. So the OAuth is a authentication. The REST is just another way of what they call REST API. It's just from your perspective, it's a URL request with some curl options. Off it goes, and back comes the data we need. And so that's as deep as I want to get into this, because otherwise this becomes a course in how to be a senior engineer, which is not my intent. So for those of you actually looking for the file, it's actually already, we posted it this morning. If I go to here, go to fmstartingpoint.com. This is the URL for our free CRM. You can download the CRM here. If you want to go to the marketplace, is a ongoing building out marketplace where you can buy and download samples or buy modules for Starting Point or whatever you want to do. This is the energy sample. Some of you see on my emails weekly. This is where you get the document management stuff or whatever. This is the PayPal one right here. And then you can go and download it. And we're going to link the overview video and this webinar here as soon as we finish editing this video for you. And then you go to download. All you do is you put in your first name, last name, and email. We'll email it to you. And then that adds you to our weekly video list. If you don't like that, then unsubscribe when you get the next email. But there you go. Pretty straightforward stuff. Questions?
A couple people ask if this is going to be plugged into FM Starting Point. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, so we are bolting this into FM Starting Point over the next couple weeks. It's going to go into the FM Starting Point Enhanced product. So we actually have 2 versions of FM Starting Point. If I go back over here, you can see versions right here. There's kind of a story behind this. What ended up happening is that people kept coming in and say, hey, can you plug in blah into FM Starting Point? And the problem was we ran the risk of kind of bloating the product. And initially we wanted it to be very simple so people could use it. It does invoicing and context, does all this stuff. And it's partially a tool you use to build, but it's also a great training tool for us to educate people. So as we train in the videos how to do things, sometimes we say, go to FM Starting Point and we'll walk you through how this works. So you can learn how to build something. I mean, it's one thing to learn, but if you start with a blank piece of paper, right? I mean, if I say build a system and you start with a blank piece of paper, you're going to spend a lot of time. And so we build Starting Point, so it's already kind of done for you, and it's unlocked, it's free, you can recycle it. What we did is people who wanted extra widgets added on, like PayPal, and we have a new calendar thing that we're doing with this. That comes with our training course. We have these training courses. This stuff is all free. If you actually end up we actually have a training course where it comes with all our videos. So this is not really a giant commercial. I guess it kind of is, so I won't bother you with this. But a lot of you who are watching this video already have our bundle, have this bundle. And this is a complete bundle. It includes all our training courses, and it includes a copy of FileMaker Pro 16, the regular version of 16, and it includes the Starting Point Enhanced. And it's a 1-year subscription, so you get all the updates for 1 year. So if you bought it right now, then you would next year, whenever the new version of whatever FileMaker came out, if it comes out within the next year, which it should, then you would get that as part of it, plus the new training. That's where we have the enhanced, because we wanted to fork the product. And so the basic one has all the free stuff, but the PayPal integration, the calendar, so there's some tax, sales tax lookup technology, things that are a little bit more complicated. They are what we call side nuggets. So in Starting Point, you open it up, it looks the same, but if you go to layout mode on the side, kind of pushed off the side is extra features that you can drag it back on the layout and activate it. And so those are the quote side nuggets. So it's kind of like if you do in America, the modern thing is you go through a drive-through window and they say, would you like to supersize it? So this is kind of the supersize. So you can supersize it and then you drag the pieces on. So this sample's free. It's there. If you want extra hand holding, then that's available. Just email us. Or if you got a local consultant that you're already working with, talk to them, ask them if they know how to do REST API stuff. If they do, then get them to work on this for you. And if they don't, then email our team.
One person asked, are there limits on the item description text for a line item once it goes to PayPal? In other words, if the description's long-ish, will PayPal cut it off?
Probably. I mean, FileMaker is one of these platforms, to give you an idea, that you could put almost unlimited levels of text into a field. I think I don't even remember, 64K. I mean, pages and pages and pages of text can go in a field. Most data systems are not that way. They're fixed length fields. So what I could do is just, you could just try it, I guess. RC Mobile at RC Consulting. But I would expect, because remember, PayPal is written probably on some big SQL or Oracle system, right? I mean, they're big data center. They're not going to have unlimited length fields. So odds are that, I could take.
The description field has a maximum length of 1,000 characters.
Oh, that's quite a bit.
And the item name field, which is the one that we use in this API demo file, has a maximum length of 200 characters.
Okay, so 200 is a little more smaller, but if you think about it, so there's also a description field that you can send to it as well, that we're not sending to it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, would that be, so it'd be the item name and then a description next to it? Is that how that would work?
Yes, sir.
Most people don't have item name and description as separate components of an invoice, at least not most of the invoices I've seen. It's normally just like one field, a SKU. Yeah, so anyway, so you get the idea. It'll take up to 200 characters. You could actually put a counter on here. Yeah, so I just send it there and I can look at it and so you start stretching it, right? So it'll stretch down to about 200. And then if you had it says description there, right? So we'll have to check that. That you might be feeding that into the item description, in which case that might be the 2000 one, right? Once again, that's kind of an edge case. I mean, I wouldn't write a book and put it in there because that makes for a really ugly invoice, right? And here's part of the business process here. I'm going to kind of leave us with this, is that you're going to build this, and this invoice over here is probably not aesthetically what you're going to want, right? Just because they want their own custom stuff. They'll probably generate and send an invoice out of here to a customer, and then you'll also probably send them the online one, which they'll see as almost being like a summary of it, and they pay it. And then you could still send them, PDF invoice, a final invoice to them from your own FileMaker system that's customized with whatever you want on it, right? So understand that really the person, you're going to look at a situation where they could technically print both invoices and they don't look identical, but the numbers are the same and the financials are the same. So that's part of the business process you have to work out if that's acceptable for you, right? There's a lot of time savings with this, but you have to be comfortable with the fact that the customer is going to see the invoice there. They might look at it, and will look different than the one that you're probably going to send them out of FileMaker, right? Or maybe you don't send them one out of FileMaker at all. Maybe that's part of your business process.
I think that's about it. Just if anyone has further questions or we maybe missed one of yours, please email us at support@RC Consulting and we can continue the conversation there.
Comments, questions, send to support RC Consulting. If you post things online in a forum, we may not see them. The support, we have an entire team of tech support and coaches there that answer the questions out of support. It's like 8 or 9 people in there that do that job. If you want the links for these, let us know. Otherwise, we'll send everyone a follow-up email and information on the recording. And I appreciate it. That's it for today. We'll catch you at the next webinar.